Okay. I think it's about 12 o'clock. And thank you all for being here to spend your wonderful noontime with us. This is part of the Positive Behavioral Intervention and Support Echo series. And we have been doing this since probably April. So thank you all for, staying with us for the entire time or joining us today if you are new. And some of the logistics we want to share before we get started with today's session is that we want to acknowledge that this ECHO series is being supported by the Cigna grant and also by the KU Pediatrics and KCART. And when you are logged in, you are muted. And but please feel free to use the chat to communicate, or if you need to engage in a conversation with the presenter later, please feel free to unmute yourself as well. Because this is an ECHO series, and the beauty of it is that we are a community and we are all teaching and all learning. So if you can, we would appreciate you keep your cameras on so that we can see your beautiful faces and smiles. And if you wish to receive a completion certificate, please do ensure that you log your name correctly so that we can keep track of your attendance. At the end of the entire series, we would be able to provide you with a certificate that lists all the hours that you have been able to attend with us. Next slide. So before we get started, we would love to get to know you a little bit more. So my name is Alice John, and I am a faculty member here at KU Medical Center, and has been working on this PBIS ECHO series. Hannah, I think Hannah, we are seeing your emails. Hopefully we don't have any secret. Anyway, and then we also have another wonderful host here, Dr. Linda Hasman-Powell. Linda, do you want to say a few words? Linda, I think you are speaking, but you are muted.
All right, I feel like a Pink Floyd song. Your lips move, but I can't hear what you're saying. So I am the director of community research here at the University of Kansas Medical Center. I've worked in positive behavioral support since the late 90s. Back when Ed Mayan was doing some stuff through the University of Kansas. And have worked with PBIS and actually have provided support for the PBS initiative that is a state Medicaid plan reimbursable activity. If anybody's interested in that, I can channel you guys in the right direction. And so we just thought as professionals who have been involved with behavior and behavior analysis and positive behavioral supports and the ECHO framework where we provide information and then can do case presentations, that it would be a lovely marriage to be able to try to get information out to community providers. So we're glad that you guys are all here. Thank you very much. And now Rene or Alice is going to talk a little bit about our wonderful presenter, Rene Jamison.
Thank you, Linda. Today our presenter will be Dr. Rene Jamison, and she is an associate professor at the Department of Pediatrics at KU Medical Center, and she is also the founder and director of the Girls Night Out or GNO program. She also directs the Kansas LAND program, which is a program that does a lot of education, research, and training related to developmental disabilities. I think Dr. Jamison is having a little bit of technical difficulty here trying to log on. So we're gonna just talk about some other things before she can introduce herself and say hi to you all as well. This is good timing. I think Dr. Jamison is able to join right now. And I thank you for Lori and Lacey for putting your names and your affiliation in the chat. We are glad to see Children's Mercy and Blue Valley School District representation here. Okay. Next. Is that all the slides? No, okay. Yeah, so thank you, Hannah. We will have it. This is our agenda today. So we are doing our introduction and we will have a short didactic presentation from Dr. Jamison. And after that, we will have a case presentation and we would love to have your discussion and follow-up questions and suggestions. Again, this is an all teach and all learn community. So your participation is absolutely the key. And we will summarize the recommendation. And in some of the slides, you might be seeing this level up sign on the right side here. So when you see this sign, we really want to hear from you. You can please feel free to type in the chat, or when appropriate, you can also unmute yourself to chime in as well. Next slide. So I felt like I have said this many times, but we do have some component of evaluation here. So thank you all for who have already been providing us valuable data and feedback. But for this, after this session, we also will have a evaluation link that will send it to you. So we would appreciate you giving us feedback through providing that evaluation data. And this is super important so that we can provide it back to our funders so that we can continue to provide trainings like this to the community. Okay, next. And we have, so the ECHO series is actually going with, this is our, the second to the last session, and we will also have another session next month. And we are still open to have case presentation to be submitted. So if you have a case that you would like to discuss with the presenter and the expert hub team, please feel free to email us, and we will email the link that you can submit the case presentation. Next slide. Yeah, so before I talk about the the information and the recommendations involving clinical medicines based on evidence that is currently accepted within the profession, this is just trying to say that all the information we presented are evidence-based, making sure that they're objective and accurate. We also have, as part of the PBIS grant, we also provide more in-depth support. So we also provide one-on-one case consultation. So if you have cases, either the student or child you work with that need additional support, please also feel free to email us and let us know. Okay.
And this is Linda. I'd just like to jump in here and say, we are really interested in being able to provide some of this case consultation for you guys as well. It's part of what we're funded for, so it's free, right?
Yeah.
So I would take advantage of it while the grant lasts so that you have the opportunity for free case consultation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. I think I'm going to turn over to our presenter today, Dr. Jamison.
Hello. Sorry, I apologize. I'm taking a few minutes. I had my presentation disappear, and so I've been trying to hunt it down, but also just trying to open up a different presentation because this is a topic that I actually do speak quite a bit about. So I'm just going to wing it, but I was just hoping to pull up a different set of slides. And so I will try to keep up in the chat as well.
If not, Rene, Hey, if not, Renee, we can all keep up with the chat if there's any questions.
Yeah, and I would love to just hear, maybe just while I'm finishing pulling this up. I know in the chat I saw for a minute ago that people were chiming in where they're from, and so I just know who my audience is. I'll let you know I like to know that. Maybe you could just summarize. It looks like we have people from.
Yeah, we have a very diverse group here. So we have friends from Children's Mercy or Blue Valley School District. We also have Megan here from USD 305 from Central Kansas Co-op. And we have Angie here from A&W Special Education Co-op as well. And we have Elizabeth from Sunflower Health Plan, definitely very, very important stakeholder in the children's mental health and behavioral health. We also have Dana from USD 262. So yeah.
Well, I heard lots of familiar places because, one of the things that I do is work with our autism diagnostic teams across the state. So I could hear some familiar locations where we have lots of teams. Well, as I'm pulling this up, I'll just introduce myself, Rene Jamison. And I don't know if Al said much, but I'm a licensed psychologist and associate professor at the Center for Child Health and Development in KU Pediatrics. And one of the roles that I have is direct the Girls Night Out, or GNO program, which is a program that I designed specifically for girls and other girls with developmental disabilities, specifically autism. And so I'm going to talk to you today about that program a little bit about differences, potential differences in social communication for girls with autism that may have some implications for what you do, and tell you a little bit about our intervention program, just as a way to talk about staying connected and identifying some effective strategies to use with this population, and then in particular in the community. And then would love to address any questions that people have. And let's see, I'm going to share my screen here in a second. You gave me permission to share.
So while Renee's doing that, just to build a little bit off what she has said, I'm sure some of you, especially if you're in the school, have heard of peer networks, where you use typically developing kids in the classroom to be able to help augment social programs for kids with autism, where we teach the little peers how to do prompting and how to invite their friends and how to persevere, right? How to be tolerant of neurodiversity, and then teaching our kids with autism how to be able to respond appropriately to their peers. Wonderful program. I think Renee is groundbreaking in that. One of the things we know, and I don't want to steal any thunder that you may have here, Renee, but that girls are often underdiagnosed. They tend to get diagnosed more in their adolescent years. There's a variety of hypotheses about why that's the case. But Renee has taken an evidence-based approach to being able to address the discrepancy in some of the girls with autism that we see. So it looks like, Renee, we're seeing your presentation mode screen, Renee, instead of the actual, there you go. So I'll turn it over to Renee.
I don't know why you wouldn't be, due to all my technical difficulties this morning, just kind of like slide right in there. So I'm gonna, it says 59 slides. That's not gonna be the case. I'm just using this because I tried to pull up a presentation that I would be able to reference just to get through some of the key points, because the other one disappeared. But thank you, Linda, for that introduction and kind words. And yes, the peer, I actually started my work with Deb Camps and Linda Heitzman Powell's collaborator and at Juniper Gardens and working in peer networks. So lots of value, and we'll always remember Dr. Camps teaching me about use of peers to promote social skills and kind of the ratio behind that. Okay, so ignore all of this, but thanks for being flexible, and I'm glad everyone's here. I welcome questions, whether it's in the chat or live. so that we can, I guess, get to the things that you're the most interested in. So one of my original aims was to just tell you, Dr. Heitzman already mentioned that girls are underdiagnosed, and yes, there's lots of theories about that, or there's fewer girls that have a diagnosis of autism compared to boys, and there's lots of explanations about that, but that's not really what I want to focus on, but more about the implications of that, and then more practical application. But if we have about 4 to 5 to 1 males to females that receive that diagnosis, then we know that that's going to mean there's fewer females within research studies, within intervention programs. That has implications of its own. I like to say there's 1 in 38 males and 1 in 52 females with the diagnosis of autism. That's the Center for Disease Control estimates. And then you can see, I think that discrepancy is really highlighted when you think about it and look at it that way, as opposed to thinking of the 1 in 59 persons with autism. So when you have more males in research studies, then that means what we know about the presentation of autism is primarily based on male samples, or the response to intervention, again, primarily based on male samples. Not saying that what we know isn't applicable to females, just want us to take pause and think about those things, particularly as we think about the presentation, or kind of what we know in terms of need too. I also think that it has implications for when you think about special education or programs, that fewer girls are often represented there. And so that means fewer opportunities to interact with same gender, similar aged peers, and practice some of those socially nuanced skills, or be within opportunities to make connections with other people. Now, I think that's an implication that's secondary to thinking about prevalence and less information. I'm going to come into talking about the differences that we see in terms of social communication, I guess, and I thought this was the one that had that slide on there, but when we think about potential differences in social communication or behavior, we want to think about, well, what are those expected differences that we know in people without autism, or that, you know, and when I say gender differences, I mean on this broad level, right? I mean, there's lots of individual differences, but some of the work around social communication and behavior is relevant to thinking about the characteristics of autism spectrum disorder, with girls being more likely, particularly early on in development, getting more pretend play, imaginative play, like developing that sooner, or like joint play as compared to boys, although they are also picking that up, like from a global standpoint. And so if you think about autism and that being something that we are looking for in terms of diagnosis or presentation, is are they interested in other kids their age? Are they doing some pretend play with someone else and sharing that imaginative play, or doing some initiating? And if we see that earlier in girls in general, then perhaps that has implications around whether or not it's discrepant between what you would expect in typical development or autism. More use of nonverbal communication, more use of eye gaze paired with gestures, or paired with vocal communication. So again, thinking about that as a core characteristic of autism, thinking about that comparison group. Well, what would we expect from girls in general? And then how does that align with girls that we might be evaluating for autism? The more complex conversational skills, often in terms of relationships, emotion focused, or focused around the interaction there, providing emotional support to one another. There's some literature out there that talks about girls being more likely to engage in what's called like co-action activities. So in order to have more social opportunities, so they might be, you know, at an event or watching a game or playing a game, but they're doing lots of conversation and communication and connection within that activity, in comparison to some activities where males are more engaged in the activity. And we see that in a lot of the girls that I work with around, talking about, well, I'm not interested in volleyball, or I'm not interested in painting, or going to this movie, but thinking about, well, that you're going to go and connect with someone else and have conversation and build relationship, and it's not just about the activity. So we see some of those differences to consider in there as well. So thinking about that as not just in terms of diagnosis, but also in terms of, well, what are some important skills or kind of situations that other girls might be involved in, where their peers have this set of skills or expectations that would be important in terms of intervention as well. I'm going to skip ahead to, I guess it's behind in this slide. So thinking about, we talk about like this layers of complexity, or the girls with autism are actually demonstrate an increased risk, or sorry, an increased difficulties with social competence as they get older into adolescence. So sometimes girls will present with fewer social difficulties early on, and then those will be exacerbated over time. We also see what we see too, just in terms of adolescence, regardless of autism. And that first layer there thinks about, well, there's increased complexity in social norms and expectations, less caregiver involvement in terms of coordinating your activities, much more independence. Puberty occurs there. Girls often have an earlier onset of puberty, which then brings along with that increased responsibility for self-care, daily living skills. Within adolescence, there's also an increased risk for internalizing symptoms, which is anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. And then if you're a female, an adolescent female, I mentioned earlier about the complex social communication and relationships being more emotion focused, and that co-action in terms of activity plus socialization. And then females within adolescence have an even greater risk for anxiety and depression. And so this another layer on there being autism. So if social communication is already difficult, or there could be increased difficulties around daily living skills, and as the expectations get more complex, and then for females, if they're even more complex, and you have this increased risk of internalizing disorders, then this could be one of kind of these layers of complexity might be contributing to this increased social difficulties and risk for anxiety and depression. Because there's several studies out there that look at girls with autism as kind of the most at-risk group for these difficulties in comparison to boys with autism, boys without autism, or girls without autism. In fact, so the program that I'm going to talk a little bit about today, Girls Night Out, or GNO, we have about 220 girls between 10 and 27 or 28 that have completed intakes, just like the initial first step for the program. And of those, about 70% have autism, and about 20 to 30 have either waiting for a diagnosis or have another developmental disability. And of those 220 girls, 85% of that group has at least one coexisting internalizing disorder, and about 30% of that group have two or more in addition to the autism. So I think that really speaks to this elevated risk to think not just about social skills or kind of like, well, what is something unique about this population that we really need to try and impact that could make a significant shift in the trajectory. And I think that it is this kind of overall social emotional health and mental health piece to focus on. So we see that in our girls. When I say our girls, we see that as kind of a real integral part of what to address when we think about interventions and support. And if girls with autism have the same protective and risk factors as compared to those without, then we really need to increase social supports and those networks and help them make connections that can help mitigate this risk for mental health challenges, especially as in adolescence and young adulthood. So I'm gonna, oh, there's that slide. That's all right. And then I was just going to talk a little bit. So, thinking about the objectives, one would be to identify that there could be some differences in social communication that we already see between girls and boys, and to consider those things when you are thinking about what you would expect it to look like, whether it's making a referral, making a diagnosis, or addressing some of those key areas of intervention. The second being around, recognizing this elevated risk for mental health symptoms, in particular anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and how that can be addressed early on, and thinking about those prevention factors and continued support as just as impactful as the autism piece. And then you can see, there's some quotes here from some of our families when they go through that intake process. Girls and their families talk about some goals or areas of concern. So from one of our participants, I want to have experience going out and communicating and making friends, take care of myself more, but mostly making friends. Parents sharing the second quote there, my daughter dreams to hang out with friends, have a group to share and someone to talk with. So, this is really a theme that stands out for our families and can make a significant impact in someone's life. So in 2008, I started a program, Girls Night Out, and wanted to address not only those kind of social skill building aspects, but to address, increased confidence for people, to address that need for, elevated responsibilities around self-care in order to think about how that can impact self-esteem and confidence, which then increases the likelihood for people to engage in social opportunities. And it's kind of circular in it. And so that was the idea behind that. And I feel like that in the past, 10 to 15 years, that the work that we do with our families really informs the research that we're interested in, which then informs the programs that we do. And I really feel like that the voice of our families are really reflected in the work that we do. So what makes Geno unique? Well, one obvious component is that it's designed specifically for girls with autism or other developmental disabilities. The curriculum is social skills and self-care, so addressing some of those self-perception and confidence and adaptive behavior kinds of things. It's not a K-Med center, and it's within the community during social and self-care activities that are age relevant, are important to the girls, and so that they can practice these things across multiple people, places, settings, times, which is what we know from the literature is needed in order to have generalization. Or so if we're going to work on conversation or connecting with people and making friends, you really want to see lots of practice opportunities and see that within authentic opportunities to see that generalized beyond that situation. It's peer mediated. Dr. Mittal started talking about this. So we have girls without autism as well that have some training and that are participating in the program for community service hours. We have an equal number of girls with and without autism, and we typically have about 8 to 12 girls in a skills group. And so about half of those girls will be peer volunteers. They participate in the program just like everyone else. Our motto is, we all have things to work on. And so we encourage the girls to take that opportunity to identify what they can learn from everyone in the group and that they're not helpers. We give them a little bit of training or tips for how to create opportunities for success and work effectively with someone, or maybe how to address a situation that might be a little bit challenging. But for the most part, we really see this as an opportunity for girls to connect and grow alongside one another, as opposed to like being a helper or a mentor. We utilize a variety of evidence-based strategies to teach and practice, our core set of curriculum. and to be within on those skills within those different settings. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We focus on strengths, empowering girls. We are very interested in what they want to do. Girls have a voice in identifying activities, where we go and what we do. Girls, we have some, set of skills that we're working on, but also each girl is identifying goals, areas that they want to work on, and then monitoring that. And so we'll really try to individualize as much as possible. Includes both formative and summative assessments. That means we're taking outcomes on, how girls do at the beginning and then after Gino, but we're also using the information that we collect along the way to inform, how to make changes and improvements and skill building within that session. One of the things that I love is that we establish community partners, not every session, but we go out to a variety of places. Sometimes we might be a restaurant, coffee shop, and so we're just showing up there, spending maybe a little bit more time in a space than we would have. And so we're talking to the people there about our group and how to communicate with our girls, building, independence and ordering and paying and those things. But not necessarily having that community partner work too much with us, but they're learning about autism and they're getting an opportunity to interact with people. And then I think they really have a really positive experience. One of the things we do is if we might have a community partner with a set of expertise, say around in this photo, it's a salon, but we might go to a fitness center, art studio, and they could be sharing their expertise. And so we go and work with them ahead of time and talk about what autism might look like in the practical sense. In terms of in this situation, someone might, say something that seems, odd, or that they might not respond to what you say, or might be a little bit overwhelmed with someone, doing their hair, or that they might need more practice. And so we give feedback to the community partners and we build their capacity to work effectively with people of all abilities, and hopefully in the future as well. And the last point there is the buy-in. I know in the literature too, especially with adolescents, programs that consider, the individuals and the group's desire to, engage in activities or to, work on certain things, and that it's fun and it's a good use of their time. I think it's really important. You're going to see more, you're going to see better outcomes, and it's an important component. My old mentor, Dr. Reese, one of Dr. Hartzman colleagues and mentors too, used to laugh because I started this program and we had a funometer and the girls would rate how fun things were at the end of each session. That was one element of kind of, was it valid? Was it a valid intervention that they were invested in? Okay, let's see. I will just talk briefly about a couple of our core areas and then we can shift to thinking about a particular case. So our GNO program has grown to be so much more. I talked about how we've listened to the voices of our community, but when we originally started, there was a GNO teen is a kind of skills group, and so there's a curriculum that goes along with that, although it can be individualized. But then we also have ongoing social opportunities through community events that you can do before and after you participate in skills groups. We have parent night out, so our families are able to connect, and kind of other things that have grown along the way. But in our teen curriculum, we have 3 core components of the curriculum: relationship building skills, promoting independence and self-care, and promoting self-determination. And there's a set of skills that are within each one of these areas. And then again, there's a variety of strategies and supports that we use along the way to promote and teach and practice these things. So I mentioned that we use evidence-based strategies are based in social learning theory, cognitive behavioral theory, and behavioral theories. I circled ones that are probably at least a couple that are some of the main ones. One that I haven't mentioned yet on the right is in vivo coaching with specific feedback. So that provides a cognitive framework. So in the moment when someone asks someone a question about what they're interested in, we say, great job, thanks for asking about what they're interested in, or I like how you joined the group, or thanks for trying that, even though it was unfamiliar or hard. And then that is paired with a GNO buck that you can spend at the GNO store, which is a token economy. So that cognitive feedback, oh, this is what someone means when I asked about the other person's interest, or, oh, I guess I did join in even though it was hard, as opposed to, really focusing on someone who might be, oh, I don't want to do it, I'm not interested, I can't do it. And so that framework helps in the moment then is increasing the likelihood of someone participating the next time, which is that reinforcement of target skills. And again, the GNO bucks in the GNO store is they're able to shop every week, and they can, we were interested in, well, what do you want to earn, so that it is actually reinforcing for people. And the skills group is about 10 to 12 weeks. I mentioned about half with autism or related diagnosis, and then the other half are the peer volunteers, 2 hours once a week out in the community. We typically have a theme or activity around those core set of curriculums, concepts, skills that build upon one another along the way. And then we have some of those core things that happen every time: the in the moment coaching, the GNO bucks in the GNO store. And we have lots of visual supports that we use in GNO. We have some conversation cards so the girls can look down and see tips about talking about where you're at, what you're doing. And then we have a planner that houses some of our materials, and oftentimes some supports that we create along the way for individuals. But I always say that the magic's not in the stuff, although sometimes we can get distracted by that. But the magic really is in creating the opportunities for success, using the peers, not just peer volunteers, but each other, to encourage people to try something that's, difficult, and create opportunities for success, and in that in the moment feedback. So that's really, I would say, kind of the core elements that we see as being effective. So then the skills build on to each other over time, and we do more individualizing along the way. And then we even built in a reunion, because girls, had this weekly social opportunity, and then all of a sudden that stopped. And as I mentioned before, they didn't have a lot of social networks. And some girls would say they're not interested in that. And I always say, well, you don't always, know what you like till you try it. You get a little taste of something. And some of our girls were like, okay, this is really great. I got to get to know people, and I'm doing this every week. And then it stopped. So that really tanked some mood and depression again. So that we built in a reunion session a few weeks down the road, so there's something to look forward to. But then over time, we have then built in these ongoing opportunities. So we do have a lot of ways for our girls to stay involved and stay connected. Just checking to see how I'm doing on time. I'll just point out maybe one or two more things. Within the core areas, relationship building skills, one is finding common ground or relating to the relationship. And this, we talk about breaking it down in GNO. So, well, what is it that we might do to, forge friendships? Something that we notice is our girls with autism, all of our girls were using the conversation cards, generate some questions, chit chat, talking to people, but our peers were remembering stuff about the girls, asking them about, how was that game you played in, or the new relationship that you have, or, talking about it, shared experiences. And we didn't see that as much in our girls with autism. So we built in this relate to the relationship concept that's really driven around, okay, well, what is it? This is, Alice, and here's her interest. What do we have in common? And then I need to remember those things and then ask about them later, or those could be things that we could relate on and get together with someone. And so really, again, that cognitive framework that might come easy for some people, but for our girls with autism, we really needed to break it down and provide some supports in terms of thinking through those pieces. Promoting independence and self-care skills. We have sessions that are around selecting clothing that matches the context where you're going, what you're doing, body care, around hygiene, health, fitness, nutrition. We have really built in some kind of mantras, confidence building, and these things are not to, dictate to someone what their appearance is like, but it's trying to help girls who, some of which have struggle with, leading these day-to-day or daily living activities, to be able to do these things on their own and take care of themselves and build confidence, which then can be utilized in all sorts of activities. We have a lot of girls who are, 16, 17 years old, whose moms are, trying to get the shampoo out of their hair, and neither party wants to be part of that, or just feel like they can be confident in going to new places, trying new things. And then the last piece just being building self-determination. So it's, again, very driven by what the girls are interested in, what they want to work on. One of the things that we do is there's the thing that has the boxes on it there at the top, is a self-monitoring tool that we use within their planners. And at first, they're all similar, looking at self-care and social activities. And then after we do a goal-setting activity about 4 or 5 weeks into the session, then we tailor their, self-monitoring tool around what they're interested in. And we help girls help each other in identifying some, kind of steps that they can take or things that they can monitor to help get them to their goals. So again, pieces that are driven to support their individual goals, but a framework that we can help them break it down. And finally, we have seen some pretty positive outcomes. On the right side is a graph that states girls reported fewer symptoms of anxiety and depression following GNO teen skills groups. And the first set of bar graphs are internalizing symptoms overall, so both anxiety and depression and self-esteem. And you can see the baseline, or before GNO, is the pink, and then the post is the blue, and there's a decrease or decline in those pieces, in particular around depression. And to put the favorite quote from one of our girls, it's on the right, says, "These girls' nights just keep getting better and better." And that was from someone who originally wasn't real interested in spending time and some of the things that we were doing. So, this is just a snapshot for what we like to think of as a stepping stone for what's really needed in terms of, across the lifespan with these connections and breaking down these pieces so that we can mitigate that risk for anxiety, depression, and elevated, difficulties within social communication. And because of the inclusion of peers and community partners and all the facilitators that have been involved, and our participants and their families, we really see this community-wide impact. So I am going to, I was looking at one of these other slides, I have like a case presentation, but what I think I'll do is, can I open up to questions, and I'll pull up the case presentation, and then that way if there's questions around or cases that people want to talk about, we can do that. But if not, we can look at the case. Yeah.
Yes, I think that sounds like a great plan.